everybody, I'm Natalia Bonner. Welcome to the 9 Patchalong 3.0 block number 11. We've almost made it all the way to the end. Now, you all know that I love machine quilting feathers, so of course I had to include a few feathers here on this fun block. I'm also going to be using my 4-in-1 mini machine quilting ruler, of course with our Piece and Quilt pop socket ruler grip. Now, if you've never done feathers before, never quilted them, or even if you have and you're wanting to improve, we do have a companion design workbook that includes all of these feathers drawn out. I like to use the companion workbooks to actually practice drawing right over that shape, and then when I come to my machine it feels a little bit more natural. You can pick up the companion workbooks over on our website pieceandquilt.com. Let's get stitching. This is such a fun block all about feathers. Before I actually get started, the way you are viewing this video is as if you were standing behind my machine. So in this video, I am several times going to say the bottom of the block or something like that, the bottom, the top. Just know that anytime I mention that, it's the part that almost looks towards the top of your screen here. This is a design that I do feel, at least for my own sake, it's important to know the top and the bottom of the block. All right, let's get stitching. I'm going to begin stitching on the bottom left block. You'll notice that I'm going to start stitching at the top of that block. Using my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler, I'm going to stitch a straight line diagonal right through the center of that block. When I get to the bottom of the block with that straight line, I'm ready to start right into my feathers. So on the bottom side of that block, I will fill in with feathers, starting out small at the bottom and then getting larger as I get towards the center, and then again smaller when I get right back up to the top of this feather or to the block. Now, at this point, I'm going to travel up my ditch to the next white block where again, I'll stitch that diagonal stitch right back down to the bottom of the block. At that bottom of the block, I'm going to go right into my feathers. I love machine quilting feathers. In this video, I'm quilting what I call the playful feather. This is not a traditional bump back feather, and I find that it's actually a pretty forgiving feather. Meaning, sometimes when you're stitching bump back feathers, you feel like you have to be perfect and you have to be precise when you stitch back over your original stitch line. With these bump back or these playful feathers, you don't have to be as precise, and you can leave places with small spaces between your quilting. You don't have to feel like you stitch right on top of your original stitch line. All right, before we get back to the feathers though, I want you to notice that when I traveled back down to start my feathers in these white blocks, that I stitched in the ditch kind of in a step pattern to get right back down to where I started. And I'm going to repeat that as I work my way through this block. This is another one where I did not stitch in the ditch before I began because I'm doing it as I go. All right, back to those feathers. So we're going to move on now to the third row. So right through the center of the block, we're going to stitch that diagonal line. Make sure when you hold your machine quilting ruler, you're holding it 1/4 of an inch away from your corner so that your thread will intersect right through your corner. Now to stitch these feathers, let's start out with a teardrop shape at the bottom of the block, and then from there I'm basically kind of creating an echo. Now in machine quilting feathers, a lot of times I see fingers. Now fingers are what you don't want when you're machine quilting feathers. I try to stitch my feathers starting at the bottom with a nice curve, and then as I get to the outside I create almost kind of a fat round curve. Then as I come back into the center, my feather's going to get smaller. So I don't want my feather to be the same width at the outside point of the feather as it is on the inside. When it is the same width, that's when you start to get fingery looking feathers, which we don't want. We want more of a playful feather that gets a little bit tighter as I come back to my spine each time. Now, this is also a great way to practice feathers because you're going to practice in a controlled space. I find that controlled spaces when working with feathers really help because you know you have a parameter that you have to stay in. So from there, again, working inside of my controlled spaces, I'll stitch the feathers on the top side of my line. Now, notice here that I like to stitch feathers on one side of my spine and then the opposite side of my spine all at one time. So I'm going through and stitching the whole bottom side, and then I'll come through and stitch the whole top side. Personally, I feel like I have a little bit more control and I get a little bit better results if I just focus on one side and focus on repeating one shape. Yes, you could go back and forth and stitch top and bottom at the same time as you quilted through this design, but personally, I've just found better success focusing on one side at a time. So now that I have that center row complete, now we're moving to the next white block. So again, I'll start at the top side of my block and stitch through the center, creating my spine for my feathers. When I get to the bottom point, then I'll start right into those feathers. Again, starting small and then getting larger as I go. Now, the reason that I like my feathers to go in this direction, and I'm calling it the top of the block, I feel like naturally when we look at quilts, it just seems natural that the feather should look like it's pointing to the top or going upwards. Totally personal opinion. If you want your feathers to go in different directions, if you want your feathers to go pointing the bottom, if you want them to point sideways, you totally can. Personally, I just like the look of them looking like they're going towards the top. Now, even though I'm sharing this design here on a 9-patch block, because that's what we're focusing on, this is another design that would be awesome on any type of patchwork block, any type of patchwork quilt. You could do it in the center of a block, you could do it on every single block on a patchwork quilt and end up with really great results. This is such a fun block and a great way to practice machine quilting feathers and ruler work. Block number 11 has been so much fun for me to machine quilt and share with you. We only have one more block in this fun stitch along. I can't wait to move on to the last and final block, block number 12.